The ice is already cracking. Right now, as we sit here, the champagne poppy, the man who just dropped 3 albums on the same night like he was trying to paper over a crime scene, is watching his carefully manufactured story fall apart in real time. And the people who are supposed to be celebrating this era with him are going strangely quiet. Because here is what nobody is actually talking about when they talk about the Iceman era. The numbers that went up fastest are now coming down fastest. And the numbers that never fully made sense to begin with are now starting to reveal exactly what they were built on. There are 2 timelines running simultaneously right now. There is the timeline Aubrey Drake Graham's team wants you to see, the Spotify records, the Billboard 200 three-peat, the 100 million monthly listeners milestone, the viral TikTok challenge, the White House posting the album cover, the whole cinematic rollout. And then there is the other timeline. The one where a federal lawsuit alleged that the very streaming numbers he used to declare himself back were allegedly inflated by the same bot operation he tried to blame on Kendrick Lamar. The one where the defamation lawsuit he filed against his own label got dismissed in court. The one where his own album came out. Critics across the board called it bloated and bitter. Fans admitted they were underwhelmed. And 1 million monthly listeners vanished in a single day before he even hit the 1-month mark. These 2 timelines are not separate stories. They are the same story. And by the time we finish today, you are going to understand something that the Champagne Poppy's promotional machine has been working overtime to make sure you never put together. The ice was never solid. It was manufactured. And manufactured ice melts faster than anyone expects. And when we get to the industry layer of this, and I promise you we are getting there, you are going to understand why everything Drake has done in this Iceman era, every number, every record, every claimed milestone, carries a question mark attached to it that his team simply cannot answer. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Let me set the full scene for you, because context is everything here. We are a month out from May 15, 2026, the night that Aubrey Drake Graham dropped not 1, not 2, but 3 simultaneous albums, Iceman, Habibti, and Maid of Honor, in what his team positioned as the most significant solo artistic statement of his career. And to be fair, as a rollout strategy, it was undeniably massive. The 3 projects combined came with 43 tracks across 150 minutes of new music, the biggest solo album drop in years in terms of pure volume. Iceman debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 with 463,000 equivalent album units, the second largest single-week album haul of 2026, and the largest for any hip-hop project this year. The 3 albums occupied the number 1, 2, and 3 spots on the Billboard 200 simultaneously, something that had genuinely never been done in the chart's 70-year history. On Spotify, Drake became the most streamed artist in a single day for 2026. The first day numbers were everywhere. The White House posted the album cover. DJ Academics was calling it the OVO stimulus package. Drake's fans were in the comment sections, acting like the man had personally defeated every critic who ever questioned him. But here is what I need you to understand about the stakes of this moment, because this is bigger than one album cycle. This is not just about whether Iceman is good. This is about whether Drake has genuinely recovered from what Kendrick Lamar did to him in 2024. Remember the sequence. In 2024, Kendrick dropped Not Like Us, a diss track engineered not just to hurt Drake in the rap battle, but to permanently alter how the culture relates to him. That song became a party anthem. It played at cookouts, at barbecues, at events. Kendrick performed it 5 times at a free concert in Compton. Drake's response, The Heart Part 6, landed with a fraction of that cultural weight. In hip-hop circles, the verdict was immediate and decisive. Kendrick had won. And then, rather than let time do its work, Aubrey decided to sue. He filed a defamation lawsuit against his own label, Universal Music Group, alleging they had artificially boosted Not Like Us streams. That lawsuit was dismissed in federal court in October 2025. His team appealed in January 2026. And then for months later, he dropped 3 albums simultaneously, burning a prop bot farm in his Rollout video, taking shots at Kendrick, A$AP Rocky, UMG CEO Lucian Grange, and seemingly half the industry on 18 tracks. The question the culture is asking right now is not whether the numbers were big. It is whether those numbers mean what he needs them to mean. Whether a commercially successful album translates to an actual cultural reset. And the evidence we are about to walk through is going to suggest very strongly that the answer is no. Can we just take a moment and really set the truth on what is actually happening here? Because the story being told in certain corners of the internet is that the Iceman era is a triumphant comeback, full stop. But you cannot tell a complete story by only looking at the peak. You have to look at what happened after the peak. And what happened after the peak is exactly what we are going to examine right now. Let us start with the most visible, most verifiable evidence that Iceman is already melting. And I want to go piece by piece, so there is zero room for misinterpretation. The first thing you need to look at is the sales trajectory. Week 1, 463,000 equivalent album units. Genuinely impressive. Nobody is disputing that. But week 2 came in at 225,000 units, a 52% decline. And before the Drake advocates in the comments start typing, yes, a drop from week 1 to week 2 is normal for any album. But the percentage of that drop, 52%, and the rate at which it continued, tells you something. Week 3 came in at 171,000 units, another 24% decline from week 2. Week 4 is now projecting around 134,000 units. We are watching an album that opened at 463,000 units, in the process of losing 2/3 of its weekly audience inside of 1 month. If you want to talk about an Iceman era, the ice is melting at a rate that is not being discussed honestly in these spaces. The second piece of evidence I want you to look at is the Spotify monthly listener situation. This is where it gets genuinely interesting, and this is where the stands are going to struggle the most. On June 12, 2026, it was announced that Drake had crossed 100 million monthly listeners on Spotify for the first time ever, becoming just the second rapper in history to reach that milestone. His team immediately started posting this as proof of era-defining success. And here is what they did not lead with. Almost immediately after crossing that threshold, reports emerged that his listener count briefly slipped back below 100 million. Spotify's people pointed to the rolling 28-day measurement system as explanation. And while that is a real technical factor, what it reveals is that this peak was achieved at the very top of the Iceman promotion cycle, driven almost entirely by fresh release energy, and is already showing the gravitational pull of real-world listener interest, which is to say, the interest is fading. We lost over 1 million monthly listeners in a single day at one point in this cycle. 1 million people. That is not normal fluctuation. That is an audience telling you something about how they feel about what they heard. The third piece of evidence is the Spotify song record correction, and this one almost got swept under the rug. When Iceman dropped, Spotify announced that Make Them Cry had set the record for most streamed song in a single day for 2026. Drake's team ran with it. Fans were celebrating. And then Spotify issued a correction. It turned out the initial streams review had been completed manually, and I want to quote this directly from Spotify's statement. Streams from 2 different album tracks being combined. The real most streamed song of the day was still BTS's Swim, not Drake's track. Now, the record was corrected. Spotify apologized. But does everybody understand how that actually sounds? The biggest streaming platform in the world announced a record for Drake's biggest day, the day he was supposed to be crowned back, and then had to walk it back because of a counting error. That is the Iceman era in a sentence. The fourth piece of surface evidence I need you to absorb is the critical reception. Because the commercial numbers are one story, and the artistic reality is a completely different one. And those two things cannot exist in separate conversations forever. The Guardian called Iceman a boring, bloated disaster. The Daily Bruin described it as a project where Drake sounds incredibly bitter and immature, one that falls short of the hype. Slant magazine called it an insular ode to self-pity. Multiple reviewers pointed to the same line on National Treasures, where Drake literally rhymes Iceman with nice man, as emblematic of what feels like an artist who has genuinely stopped trying at the lyrical level. One critic noted that I'll make them cry Drake raps, been so sure of my words that I haven't used a pencil, and then proceeded to prove that point unintentionally across 18 tracks. The point is not that critics always get it right. The point is that when your chart numbers are dropping at 52% per week and your critical reception is almost universally describing you as bitter, repetitive, and coasting, those two data points are telling you the same story from different angles. And speaking of which, there is more coming. And the stands are really not going to like this part. Oh, and do I have more? Because what I just walked you through was the stuff you can see on the surface, the numbers you can check yourself, the reviews you can read, the Spotify corrections that are already documented. But the layer beneath that, the cultural layer, that is where this story gets genuinely important. And that is where the people defending the Iceman era most loudly have the least to say. Let me talk about what the culture is actually doing versus what is being reported about the culture. Because there is a gap there that is significant. The first cultural data point I want you to consider is Kendrick Lamar's complete and total silence. In the weeks since Iceman dropped, 3 albums, 43 songs, shot after shot at Kendrick, references to the beef, bars aimed at his circle, Kendrick Lamar has not said a single word. Not a tweet. Not an Instagram story. Not a hint of a response. And I need you to sit with what that silence communicates at a cultural level, because this is not neutral. When you have already performed Not Like Us at the Super Bowl to over 100 million people, when you have already won 5 Grammy Awards for that same song, Song of the Year, Record of the Year, Best Rap Song, Best Rap Performance, Best Music Video, when your GNX album received critical acclaim and your world tour sold out, you do not need to respond. Kendrick's silence is not avoidance. It is dominance. It is what winning looks like when the person you beat keeps swinging at you and you have already moved on to a different floor of the building. The second cultural evidence point is the reaction from Kendrick's camp and people adjacent to this situation. Because what is fascinating about Iceman is not the people who praised it enthusiastically, it is who did not show up to praise it, and how loudly that absence registers. The critical hip-hop community, the people whose cosign matters most when you are trying to win a cultural argument rather than just a chart race, was largely either indifferent or dismissive. The word that kept coming up from fans and critics alike was the same word: underwhelmed. And that word is devastating in this specific context, because Iceman was positioned as a statement. You do not drop 3 albums simultaneously after the most damaging loss in your career, unless you believe you are about to say something undeniable. The culture looked at what he said and responded with a shrug. That is a cultural verdict. The third piece of cultural evidence I want to lay in front of you is the OVO sound dynamic, because it is worth noting that reports emerged suggesting that the Iceman trilogy may have been Drake's final contractual obligation to Universal Music Group. A source close to the situation, as reported by Hot New Hip Hop, suggested that these 3 albums fulfilled his existing deal, potentially opening the door to him going independent or signing elsewhere. Now, if that is true, and I want to be clear, this has not been officially confirmed, it reframes the entire Iceman era, because it means these albums were not simply a creative statement. They were, at least in part, an exit strategy. You drop 3 albums at once, you fulfill your contract, and you get out from under the same label you are currently suing. And here is what that means culturally. The Iceman era, the supposedly triumphant comeback, may have been designed at the business level first and the artistic level second. And that is a completely different story than the one being sold on the surface. The fourth cultural moment I need to flag is the most ironic one of this entire era. And I could not make this up. During the Iceman Rollout, specifically in episode 4 of his livestream series, Drake was literally shown setting a bot farm on fire with gasoline. It was cinematic. It was dramatic. It was clearly designed as a visual statement responding to the bot allegations that had been swirling around his streaming numbers. He burned a bot farm as his big symbolic gesture. Let that land for a second. The man who had accused Kendrick Lamar and UMG of using bots to boost Not Like Us streams. The man whose own streaming numbers were the subject of a separate federal class action lawsuit alleging bot manipulation linked to a gambling platform called Staked US, decided that his best response to bot allegations was to literally burn a prop bot farm on camera. And the question I have to ask, the question I cannot stop coming back to, is, who does that? Who is so consumed by the narrative of bot manipulation that they build it into their album Rollout as a visual centerpiece? If not someone for whom that topic is deeply, that is not the behavior of someone who is unfazed and unbothered. That is the behavior of someone who is very much both fazed and bothered. Now I want to give you the counter-argument, because I think it is important to acknowledge it before I dismantle it. The counter-argument is this: Drake is still #1 on the Billboard 200 for 3 consecutive weeks. He broke multiple Spotify records. He crossed 100 million monthly listeners. These are objectively impressive commercial achievements. And to that counterargument, I say, yes, absolutely. Those things happened. And now let me show you what those things actually mean in the context of the system that produced them. Because this is where the story shifts completely from entertainment to business, and from gossip to the machinery behind the gossip. Listen, I just have to say this, because I have been building toward this point for this entire video, and I need you to be ready for it. What I am about to walk you through is not about whether Drake is talented. It is not even about the beef with Kendrick. It is about the infrastructure behind these numbers, what that infrastructure reveals about how the game is actually played, and what happens when that infrastructure starts to crack. Here is the first systemic layer. There is a federal lawsuit now dismissed, but not forgotten, that alleged Drake, through his relationship with a gambling platform staked to U.S., participated in a scheme where money moved through the platform's tipping feature and was allegedly used to fund bot farms that artificially boosted his Spotify streaming numbers. The plaintiffs in that case were LaShawna Ridley and Tiffany Hines, and they filed against Staked@Us parent company Sweepstakes Limited, Drake, online streamer Aiden Ross, and a man named George Nguyen, who was described as the alleged facilitator of the botting operation. The case was dismissed with prejudice on May 1, 2026. But dismissed does not mean disproven. Dismissed with prejudice means the court found the specific legal theories insufficient. It does not mean the underlying activities never happened. What the case established in the public record is that there are people willing to put their names on a federal court filing alleging that Drake's streaming numbers were being propped up by the same kind of artificial inflation that he was simultaneously accusing Kendrick and UMG of using against him. And let me say that again, because the irony of this is something I have been saying for a long time, and now everybody can see it plainly. Drake accused Universal Music Group of using bots to boost Kendrick streams. And a separate federal lawsuit alleged that Drake himself was the beneficiary of a bot operation. The man who pointed the finger is standing in the same fingerprint. Now, I want to be clear, these are allegations. Drake has not been found liable for any of this. But what I think is happening here is something deeper than any single lawsuit. What I think is happening is that the streaming numbers that his entire comeback narrative is built on exist in a context where their legitimacy cannot be fully established. And when the legitimacy of your numbers cannot be fully established, what exactly are you celebrating? The second systemic layer is the UMG lawsuit and what it reveals about Drake's actual position in the industry right now. Think about what he did. He filed a defamation lawsuit against his own label, the label that distributes his music, the label his fans were directed to in order to stream his albums, for allegedly boosting a competitor's song. That lawsuit was dismissed in October 2025 by Judge Jeanette Vargas, who determined that the allegedly defamatory statements in Not Like Us were an unactionable opinion. UMG's response was remarkable. They said, and I am paraphrasing because I have to, that from the outset this suit was an affront to all artists and their creative expression and never should have seen the light of day. His own label said that. The label that is still distributing his music. The label whose platforms his fans are streaming Iceman on right now. And then Drake's team appealed in January 2026, arguing that the judge created a dangerous, categorical rule. And then in April 2026, just weeks before the Iceman release, his attorneys filed another brief calling the dismissal a reversible error. So the man is simultaneously releasing albums through a label he is suing in federal appeals court. And then on Iceman, on a track called Bees on the Table with 21 Savage, he raps, I'm fighting the man, not suing the rapper. Which, if you follow what has been publicly documented, is literally what the legal filings say. They are suing UMG, not Kendrick. But he is rapping about it like it is a heroic stand against institutional power, when what it actually looks like from the outside is a man who lost a public cultural battle, and then tried to relitigate it in the courtroom and in the streaming metrics, only to be told no at every turn. Can we stop and think about what this actually means for a second? The guy is on appeal, in federal court, against the label distributing his comeback album. While releasing 3 albums, he allegedly needed to drop to fulfill the same contract. That is not a triumphant era. That is managed survival. The third systemic layer, and this is the one I want to sit with because it is the most important, is what Spotify's rolling 28-day measurement system actually reveals about audience behavior when you remove the hype cycle. Because here is something that the analytics people understand, and that does not get explained well enough. On Spotify, monthly listener counts reflect the last 28 days of activity. When you drop 3 albums simultaneously, you flood the system with 43 songs across 150 minutes of content. Every stream of any of those songs in the next 28 days counts toward your monthly listener total. So the 100 million monthly listener milestone that Drake hit on June 12th was driven by 4 weeks of concentrated post-release streaming that included a massive promotional push, pre-release curiosity, casual listeners who checked in once, fans who streamed on release day, people who were drawn in by the TikTok challenge on Shawbang. And yes, whatever organic versus artificial stream distribution looks like in a post-bot allegation world. Now the 28-day window is starting to scroll past the release date. The most intense concentration of streams is moving out of the measurement window. And what do you get? You get a listener count that briefly slipped back below 100 million before the promotional cycle even had time to fully cool down. That is not a detail. That is a headline. The headline is the peak of the Iceman era in terms of monthly listener count. Lasted approximately 4 weeks. And it is already receding. What I want everybody to understand is this. I have been saying for a long time that the streaming economy has become the metric by which we judge cultural relevance. And it is the most gameable, most manipulable, most context-dependent metric that has ever been used to measure art. Drake did not invent this. He mastered it. He understood earlier than almost anyone that if you dominate the numbers, you dominate the narrative. And if you dominate the narrative, a significant portion of the audience will assume the art is dominant too. And that strategy worked. It worked brilliantly for a long time. But the Kendrick moment broke something in that equation. Because Not Like Us did not just win a streaming battle. It won a cultural one. It got played at events that had nothing to do with rap. It got performed at the Super Bowl. It won 5 Grammys. And no streaming number, no matter how big, carries that weight. The weight comes from the culture adopting the song as its own. And the culture did not adopt Iceman. The culture checked in, listened, said, okay, and kept moving. That difference between a number and a cultural moment is the difference between Kendrick's 2024 to 2025 and Drake's 2026. Now here is the truth bomb that has been sitting underneath everything we have talked about today, and I want to deliver it with the weight it deserves. The single most revealing thing about the Iceman era is not the first-day numbers. It is not the bot allegations. It is not the lawsuit. It is not the critical reviews. It is this. Kendrick Lamar did not need to respond. Not one word. Not one bar. Not one Instagram like. Drake dropped 3 albums, 43 songs, 150 minutes of new music, multiple tracks aimed directly at Compton's finest, lyrical shots at A$AP Rocky, references to the beef from multiple angles. And the man who allegedly ended Drake's run as hip-hop's dominant voice sat in complete silence. And that silence is reportedly deliberate. According to what has been covered widely, Kendrick appears to be operating as though this chapter is already closed. And why wouldn't he? He performed Not Like Us at the Super Bowl to an audience of more than 100 million people. He won 5 Grammy Awards for a diss track, Song of the Year, Record of the Year, Best Rap Song, Best Rap Performance, Best Music Video. His GNX album was critically acclaimed. His world tour sold out. The cultural math, as one widely circulated piece put it, is not close. And here is what that means for the Iceman era. Drake reportedly fulfilled his UMG contract with this trilogy, possibly positioning himself to go independent or find a new label situation. His defamation lawsuit appeal is still pending in the Second Circuit. His streaming numbers are in decline week over week. His critical reputation, with respect to the artistic quality of Iceman specifically, took another hit, not recovered. And the man he needed to respond to him, the man whose response would have validated the Iceman era as a real continued chapter in a real continued rivalry, has simply moved on. That is the truth bomb. Not that Iceman failed commercially. It did not. The truth bomb is that commercial success without cultural resonance in 2026 does not move the needle on the question everyone is actually asking. And the question everyone is actually asking is Drake still that guy? And the fact that Kendrick's silence is the most powerful statement anyone has made about Iceman tells you everything about what the answer currently is. Now here is what I want to be clear about as we bring this home, because I am not a person who roots for anyone's downfall. I am a person who roots for the truth, and the truth has a way of sorting things out on its own schedule. What I think is happening with Kendrick Lamar right now is exactly what integrity in this industry looks like when it operates at the highest level. While everything around the Iceman era has been manufactured, the Rollout spectacle, the prop bot farm fire, the coordinated streaming push, the social media amplification machine, Kendrick has been building something that does not require manufacturing. 5 Grammys for a song he made in a matter of days in the middle of a beef. A sold-out world tour built on music that the culture actually adopted as its own. A Super Bowl performance where he looked like the most powerful artist in the world without 1 ounce of spectacle that felt forced. And let me give you the contrast one-liner that I think captures this entire situation in a single sentence. One man dropped 3 albums to convince the culture he is still relevant. The other dropped 1 diss track and went quiet because he already knew the answer. Think about the discipline that takes. Think about what it requires to watch 43 songs aimed in your direction and decide that the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing. That is someone who knows exactly where they stand and does not need a number to confirm it. Every piece of evidence we walk through today points to the same place. The bot allegations circle back to Drake. The lawsuit against UMG is still alive in the appeals court, and his own label has called it an affront to artistic expression. The critical reception to Iceman described it as bitter, repetitive, and artistically in decline. The monthly listener numbers peaked and have already begun to recede. Kendrick is silent because silence, in this situation, is the most devastating weapon available. The ice is melting, and the person who froze it in place, the person who actually controls the temperature of this cultural moment, is sitting in Compton without saying a word. This is only the beginning of what this Iceman era is going to reveal. And I need you to stay locked in, because there are at least two things on the immediate horizon that are going to force this conversation to go to places the stands are not going to be ready for. First, the UMG appeal is still pending in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Drake's team filed their reply brief in April 2026, calling the district court's dismissal a reversible error. That ruling is coming. And when it comes, whatever direction it goes, it is going to be the next major chapter in the story of what this entire era actually cost him legally, financially, and reputationally. Second, if the reports about Drake potentially leaving UMG are accurate, if the Iceman trilogy was in fact the fulfillment of a contract rather than a purely creative decision, then what comes next, his first release as an independent or newly signed artist, is going to be one of the most closely watched moves in the industry in years. Will he get a deal that reflects the commercial numbers or a deal that reflects the cultural standing? Because those are different numbers, and right now they are pointing in different directions. Make sure you are subscribed, because I'm going to cover both of those developments the moment they drop, and I promise you the analysis is going to go layers deeper than anything you're going to get anywhere else. And before you go, let me leave you with this, because you need to stay right here on this channel. I have a video coming that is going to reframe this entire Kendrick versus Drake conversation in a way nobody has put together yet. We have been talking about the beef as if it ended when the diss track stopped. But what I'm going to show you is that the real aftermath of that beef, the business aftermath, the streaming economy aftermath, the label power aftermath, is still actively unfolding right now in court filings and contract structures and quarterly streaming data that most people are not reading closely enough. The person who the industry quietly respects most after all of this, the one whose leverage in every future negotiation just went up, is not the guy who dropped 3 albums in one night. And when we lay out exactly why and exactly what it means for what comes next in this industry, your whole understanding of what winning actually looks like in 2026 is going to shift. That video is next. Stay ready.